بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So this video is a kind of extension to the course that we did in which we covered Al-Aqidah Al-Wasitiyah by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and then after that we covered tafsir of Surah Al-Hujurat. And in this video inshallah ta'ala we had a number of questions that were left over that we weren't able to complete before the time expired and we ran out of time in the class. So we promised that we would try our best to record them and to broadcast them out to everybody inshallah ta'ala, and so that is what we are doing. First question, is it better to abstain from sin out of fear of Allah or being shy from Allah? I don't think there is a contradiction between those two things. I don't think a person has a choice where they say that I'm going to choose whether to abstain from this sin out of fear or out of shyness. Rather, the more you increase in shyness of Allah, the more your iman increases, and the more you increase in fear of Allah, the more your iman increases, providing that fear doesn't lead you to despair, and providing that shyness doesn't lead you to not asking Allah, or being too shy to ask Allah, or being too shy to worship Allah. So as long as the shyness and the fear are within the limits, I don't think there's a contradiction between those things. You push the shyness as much as you can within the limits, and you push the fear as much as you can within the limits, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Is it okay to read translation or Quran or tafsir of the Quran in English without reading the original Quran in Arabic first? I would suggest that you should distinguish between reciting the Quran and studying the Quran. Those two are separate ibadat to a certain extent, even though there may be some overlap. They are separate ibadat. So when you read the Quran in English, you're not reciting the Quran. You are simply studying the meanings of the Quran, like a tafsir. So what we would say about that is that if these two are both considered to be separate issues, then they exist independently of each other. You should be reciting the Quran as much as you can, and you should also be understanding and studying the Quran as much as you can, and those two are independent of each other. It's not that one necessarily follows the other, or one necessarily comes before the other. You recite the Quran as a separate ibadah, and then your study of the Quran is also separate. In terms of which one should be given some preference and priority, you need to know enough of the Quran in English to be able to act upon the basic rules and regulations. That's the most important thing. But I don't think that it's a big contradiction, and I think most people can comfortably do both, and Allah knows best. Next question. Would you recommend the tafsir of Al-Mawdudi translated into English? No, I wouldn't recommend that tafsir. And I'm not going to say it's called Tafhim al-Quran. I'm not going to say that there is no good in it from beginning to end, and there's no point of benefit from beginning to end. But it's not a tafsir that was written upon the Sunnah. It's not a tafsir that was written with the proper belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And then for that reason, I would not recommend that when you have many, mashallah, beautiful tafsir. You have the translation of Muhsin Khan, you have Sahih International, and if you go up, you have the tafsir of Imam al-Sa'di, you have tafsir of Kathir. I don't think you need to be reading Tafhim al-Quran, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Advice to those learning Arabic and comprehension, your i'rab and comprehension. So my advice to people learning Arabic is that Arabic is actually made up of parts. A part of Arabic is what you might call, in a technical sense, ilm al-ma'ani, but we're just going to call it vocabulary, mufradat, just learning vocab. And this is something anyone can do, even if you don't have your teacher with you, just to get a collection of vocab. You learn 5 words a day, learn 10 words a day. It's beautiful, it's easy for everybody to do, even for little children to do. You could start them with words, around the house: chair, desk, like pen, paper, door. These little words, and they're not learning sentences, but they're at least learning some words that they can understand. And if those words come in the Quran, that's even better. So that's one thing, vocab. The second thing that we would recommend is that you learn some kind of grammar. And there are lots of books that are written on Arabic grammar. You could go classical and go with something like Al-Ajurumiyya. Before that, you could do something more simple. We have the Madinah books, and we have, all of these other Al-Arabiya Bayni Yaday, these other little books that are out there. And indeed, many teachers have their own unique books that are totally unique to them. Arabic grammar is not that difficult, but where we come now, you've got vocab and you've got grammar. The third thing is what I believe to be the most important, and that is what we call exposure to the language. Some people call it corpus learning, which is that you get as much exposure to those words and to that grammar as possible. Classical texts, the Quran, the Sunnah, you get exposure to it through listening, through watching, through reading. Children's books are amazing. Go and get the little books for little children that are for little Arab children, not ones that are written for people learning Arabic. Books that are written for like 3-year-old Arabic native speakers. So get books for those, like the cat sat on the mat and all that kind of stuff, and build up from there. Online resources, listen to radio programs. You get those online from Makkah and places like that where they talk about things in Arabic. As much as you can expose yourself to the language, then that's what you need to do, inshallah ta'ala. Yes, there is a speaking component and an expression, what we will call a ta'bir, expressing yourself and speaking and things like that. But I think that for most people that comes later on. Right now, if you're learning in the West, you're learning maybe part-time, maybe you're learning from home. I would focus on these 3 aspects. Get your vocabulary, get some basic grammar lessons wherever you get them from, and get yourself exposure to the language, corpus learning, and stuff like that, inshallah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. When getting to know someone for the purpose of marriage, would going out in a public setting be considered to be khalwa? It doesn't matter whether it's khalwa or not, but I don't think you can do that. You can't go out in a public setting, and that's because it has 2 issues with it. Number one, it has riba. You put yourself in a situation where people doubt you. Is this a halal relationship or not? Is this guy, is he trying to get hold of this girl or not? Is she chasing after him? Is this going to be a marriage? Are they going out? Are they boyfriend and girlfriend? That it leads you to have question marks over your character. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's a fitna. It leads to a danger of falling into haram. Because even though you might be in a public space and it might not be khalwa, at the end of the day, you might be in a space where there is a potential for the relationship to grow in a way that's not, it's not praiseworthy, it's not respectful to the guy and the girl who are involved in that. So we would say that, you shouldn't do that. If their parents ask you to come to a public place and meet them, that might be a different thing. Their father is there. That might be a different situation, and every situation has its own rulings and merits and things like that. But just the general idea of meeting a girl in public because you're thinking of marrying her, I wouldn't suggest that is a praiseworthy way of doing things, and it leaves you open to question marks over your character, and it also leaves you open to fitna. And one of the things that we have a principle of in Islam is said to dhari'ah, closing the doors to things that lead to haram. I'm going to cut some of the questions I'm going to have to come back to. How do I get closer to the Quran? And is my heart in a bad state if I can't read the Quran for too long? That's a beautiful question. We get closer to the Quran in a number of different ways. We get closer to the Quran by reciting the Quran. We get closer to the Quran by reflecting upon the Quran, tadabbur, thinking about it, reflecting on it. We get closer to the Quran by memorizing it. We get closer to the Quran by studying its meanings. We get closer to the Quran by acting on it. And all of those you have to have a program for all of those. can't be a person who's just reciting the Quran and it's like he's reciting any other language. He doesn't know what it means. Instead, you have to be studying the Quran, thinking about it, reflecting on it, trying to understand it, trying to act upon it, trying to memorize it. You have to have a multifaceted relationship with the Quran. If you're not at that stage right now, it's not that your heart is bad. You know, it's like the Prophet ﷺ gave the example, the one who is, you know, the one who is sort of regular in that relationship with the Quran. You know, it's like you have a sweet taste and a great smell. And he gave the example of the fruit that has that, you know, the sweet taste and it has a beautiful smell. And you know, the one who doesn't have that relationship with the Quran, doesn't read the Quran like that, you know, you have, at the end of the day, you still have a part of that. Or maybe you don't have that in a complete sense. You have that, you know, sweet taste, but you know, don't have that beautiful smell. So it's like you've got a part of it, but you don't have the whole of it. So it's something you need to work on, and you set yourself a program, reading a set amount of the Quran every day, memorizing a little bit every day, just what's easy for you. Don't make it, you know, don't like say the Salaf, they used to recite the 7th of the Quran every day. I'm going to start when I'm not reciting the Quran at all except Ramadan, maybe not even in Ramadan, and now I'm going to start reciting, you know, 4 juz a day or 5 juz a day. That's not really realistic. Start with something simple and slowly build up, just build consistency. Start reading the translation, start asking yourself, start thinking about it, try maybe come to a tafsir class, inshallah ta'ala. How can we purify our hearts of ar-riya? These are beautiful questions, very deep questions. How can we purify our hearts from ar-riya, from showing off? That's a tough one. There are different things that you can do to purify your heart from showing off. And one of the major things you can do, one of the usul of avoiding ar-riya, is to do as many of your deeds in secret as possible. As everything you can do in secret, do it in secret. Now, taban, you can't do Salatul Jama'ah in secret, right? You can't, you know, cover your face up and go into the masjid where nobody sees you and pray in the corner row and then get out. Salatul Jama'ah is intended to be done in public. Hajj is intended to be done in public. But there are many, in fact, the majority of deeds that you don't have to let anybody know about. And definitely not this Facebook culture, Instagram culture, Snapchat culture of everything that I do, I video record it. Every good deed that I do. Keep the public deeds to one of two things. Either the deeds that you are required to do in public, teaching, Salatul Jama'ah, Hajj, that you have to do in public, or when you really want to inspire a particular person to do something, you see that they're not doing it, and you want to inspire. So you see the brothers, they're not praying their sunnah prayer, so you stand up and you pray your sunnah prayer. That's one thing. The second thing is you have to wrestle with your intention, to fight. You have to try and get over it. You have to question yourself all the time. And you have to kind of look at your heart and be aware of your heart when it slips away to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the third thing is when you feel yourself in a situation where you feel that riya coming in, and you feel that showing off coming in, don't stop doing your good deeds. In fact, lengthen them, do more of them. Like if you find yourself in salah and you're praying and you feel yourself showing off, pray longer, but just make it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't let the shaitan cut your deeds short, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. How would you advise getting over extreme shyness, especially in an Islamic environment, like asking questions, reading out loud, and answering questions? The Prophet ﷺ saw a man admonishing his brother about shyness, like saying you're too shy. And he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, دَعْهُ فَإِنَّ الْحَيَاءَ خَيْرٌ كُلُّهُ. He said, leave him, because everything about shyness is good. Having said that, there are times when shyness might go to an extreme that stops a person from benefiting, or stops a person from doing their wajibat. Someone says, I'm too shy to pray, in front of people. I'm too shy to pray Salatul Jama'ah. This is blameworthy because now it went over the limit. It went over the limits that Allah Azza wa Jal set. And it's well known that the scholars of old used to say, لَن يَنَالَ الْعِلْمَ مُسْتَحْيٌ وَلَا مُسْتَكْبِرٌ. That knowledge will not be achieved by someone who's too shy or someone who's too proud. So I guess, yes, in class you want to be able to participate in public, you want to be able to participate in the class, but wallahi, don't lose that shyness, because al-haya'a fa inna al-haya'a khayrun kullu. All of shyness is good. Everything about shyness is good. And they used to say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was more shy than a virgin bride. He was extremely shy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, extremely shy. So you should not, try to lose that characteristic, but you should be aware that if your shyness lets you go to an extreme and the shaitan gets a hold of you in it, what might end up happening with that shyness is that actually the ultimate, sort of answer to it is that you stop benefiting from the class, or the ultimate result is you stop benefiting from the class. So it's pretty important to try to keep that attribute within you, keep that quality within you, but recognize that sometimes you have to try. And the more you try, and the more your teacher kind of picks on you and you try, inshallah, you realize that. For an example, people are shy to lead the salah, for example, because they're frightened about making a mistake. But once you lead the salah a few times and you start making mistakes every now and again, you kind of realize that it's adi, it's normal. Like, I'm not saying you should make mistakes, I'm saying that like it's human characteristic, right? It's adi, it's okay, it's normal. Like, you might make a mistake, someone correct you, and you stop having that like extreme worry over it. But permissible shyness in Islam, everything about it is good, inshallah ta'ala. How do you strengthen your tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So some really beautiful questions. And what I like about these questions also is that they're very generic, very wide encompassing. Shyness, tawakkul, all of these big, how do I attach my heart to Allah? They're pretty big questions. So a tawakkul is between two extremes. One extreme is in which you believe that everything's in your hands and you burn yourself into the ground, blood, sweat and tears, just to be able to achieve anything, and you believe that all of it is in your own hands. And so you fret, you start getting neurotic, you start getting panicking about things, and you get really fretting about things, and you sort of start running around that, oh my God, if I don't do this today, it's not going to happen, it's never going to work. Oh, what about this? I'm stressed, I'm doing too many things. That's one extreme. On the other extreme is the person who sits down on the chair, they put their feet up, say if Allah wants to make it happen, He's going to make it happen. And that's not part of our deen. Neither of those two extremes. Rather, we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is in His hands. But that He subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His wisdom, is that He's placed things in this world that allow us to accomplish other things. So He's made marriage a means to have children. He's placed these means on the earth. Allah Azza wa Jal hasn't made it that you order your children by, Amazon.com. You just click a child. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such that there is a means to do that. You get married, you have kids. That's the means to do it. That's the method that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on the earth. But recognizing that method in itself isn't the reason that you actually get the result, which is you want to have a child. It's not because of you doing the means or getting married. Rather, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we join between these two things, these two sides. We say, yes, Allah has put things on the earth for us to follow them and to work and to achieve. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive for us, we're going to guide them to our ways. The ones who strive and they work really hard, we're going to guide them. We're going to guide them. We're going to guide them to the right way to do things. So yes, you have to do things. You have to work hard, but you have to recognize that those causes are just causes. They're just asbab. They're not the musabbib. They're not the one who really makes it happen. The one who really makes it happen is Allah Azza wa Jalla. And that's why how many people get married and don't have kids? How many people go for treatments and IVF and doctors and what? They don't have kids. They can't have children. So they did the means, but Allah Azza wa Jal didn't give them the tawfiq to be able to get the result out of it. But you don't want to be from the people who are so focused on the means that you become neurotic and panicking and you're running around stressing about everything. And you also don't want to be from the people who are lazy and say, well, if Allah wanted to guide me, He would guide me, and they become lazy. Rather, you work hard, but where do you work hard? You work hard within the means that are available to you. So somebody says, well, I'm low on money, and they start panicking about it, and you can only worry about what's in front of you. You can only worry about what your options are. You don't have an option to do X, Y, Z. You can't do it. Then you have to do something different. Tawakkul is to worry about what's in your control and leave the rest to Allah. Worry about what Allah has put in front of you, the things Allah has given you. Worry about those and leave what Allah hasn't given you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so this is the essence of tawakkul. What was your journey in seeking knowledge? Okay, that's a big question. I might have answered that already on a YouTube video. You can check out Memories of Medina. I have a video about that. Muhammad Tim, Memories of Medina. And in that video, I kind of talked about how I started learning. And I also talked about the fact that towards the end of the university, I really came to a revelation that I wasn't really learning. Came to this realization that I wasn't really learning in the right way, and that I wasn't really getting as far as I wanted to, and I wasn't really getting the results that I wanted because I wasn't quite doing it the right way. And I've got subsequent videos on how to seek knowledge and things like that. And inshallah ta'ala, maybe between those two videos, there's a video I think called How to Seek Knowledge, or the methodology of seeking knowledge, and there's a video about my memories of Medina. Both of those, together, kind of answer your question, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, this is a very good question. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُ. Don't spy on each other. Your younger brother in high school, who you have no idea what he does, and you go through his social media in order to keep an eye on him. Wallahi, that's a very, very good question. That is a good question. And can you go through someone's social media if you're to keep an eye on them? Allah knows best. I'm not going to answer that one. I'm going to say that we'll put that one for later, inshallah. And I don't want to give half an answer, and we'll go back to some of the mashayikh, inshallah. We'll ask them about that. What's your ideal day like? Wow, that's a good question also. So I'm not going to tell you what my personal day is like, but I'll tell you what I would love my day to be like because I don't want to make it out that I do all of those things and then people say, oh look, look at this guy, he's amazing. When in reality, maybe I don't even do 10%. But I think what an ideal day should look like, ideally it should begin before Fajr, even if it's only 10-20 minutes. A few rak'at of tahajjud you can get in there, inshallah. Your salat al-fajr in the jama'ah for the brothers, the private space in your own room for the sisters, and then start work right after Fajr. Because after Fajr, that's the time, the most productive time. And that's why there is a hadith, Hasanahu, and ba'd al-ulama, some of the scholars declare to be Hasan, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Burika fi ummati fi bukuriha. The barakah in my ummah has been put in the early morning. It's time after Fajr. And I personally find if I work at that time, that's the best time. Now what I personally like to do, again, I'm not going to sort of plug myself that I do all these things, but after Fajr, you do your adhkar sabah al-masa, do the adhkar sabah, the Fajr, and then I sit and memorize Quran, possible, revise Quran, like that's kind of core memorization time. And then inshallah, after that, usually sort of after sunrise, stay in the masjid after sunrise, pray 2 raka'at, and then go and work, do some work, as much productive work as possible. That's like sort of in the mornings. There's got to be family time, you've got to balance your day. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَكِنْ يَا حَنْظَلَةٌ سَاعَةٌ وَسَاعَةٌ. But oh Hanzala, there's a time for this and there's a time for that. So that's pretty important as well. The adhkar, definitely. The salawat in the jama'ah, absolutely. That's got to be a priority. Time for study, but definitely time for family also. And that's kind of like what I would say is, some of the points. And I talked about this in more detail in a podcast I was invited as a guest on a podcast called Freshly Grounded, so you can check that out. The episode that I was in there, we talked a little bit about daily routines and things like that too. So some of the answers would take too long if we did them all here. Is it haram that a man wears pants that are at the ankles? So what is haram is for them to go below the ankles, and the ankle is defined as your ankle bone. So if you look at the side of your foot and you touch the side of your foot where you have that big lump that comes out from the outside of your ankle, that is the point. If the material goes below the ankle bone, then this is from the major sins. And if it is above the ankle bone, even if it reaches the level with the ankle bone, it's permissible, even though the sunnah is to keep it higher than that. So, if it's cold and you want to keep it right down to your ankle bone, there's nothing haram in that, inshallah ta'ala, but don't let it go below, because the Prophet told us, مَا تَحْتَ الْكَعْبَيْنِ, what is below the ankles, فَهُوَ فِي النَّارِ, it is in the hellfire, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. How do you improve your memory? How do you improve your memory? Okay. So you improve your memory through a basic process. And again, in the video on how to seek knowledge, I think we discussed this a little bit more in some detail. But what you have is you have two variables that you can change. You have the amount that you memorize, i.e. how much you memorize in one go, and you have the amount that you repeat. So these are your two basic variables that you can adjust. Like you have like two controls, you can adjust them left or right. So you have the amount that you memorize, and you also have the amount that you repeat. That's really important, that you start off with a very small amount you memorize. So for example, you're not trying to memorize a page, 2 pages of the Quran, 1 line, half a line, and that you repeat a huge number of times, much more than you think you need. You probably think you need to repeat 10 times, 20 times. I'm talking about 100 times, 150 times. As you develop your memory, you'll be able to adjust that and to be able to memorize bigger chunks with less repetition. Definitely leaving sins and disobedience. We know the famous poem of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, شَكَوْتُ لِوَقِيعَ سُوءَ حِفْظِي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وأنبأني بأن علم الله نور وأن نور الله لا يعطاه عاصي. So, as I recall the poetry, that I asked Waqi' about my poor memory, and he indicated to me to leave sin, and he told me that the knowledge from Allah is light, and the light of Allah is not given to a sinner. So that's another aspect to it. And likewise, there are some strategies, general strategies about, give more attention to your revision than you do to your memorization. Because keeping what you've memorized is more deserving than memorizing something new. So it's more about keeping what you've memorized. So someone might have done 5 juz of the Quran, and they're like, right, I want to go 6, 7, 8, 9. I'd rather you stick with 5 and go 5.5, 6 very slowly, but keep that 6 as very, very precise than just flying through. That's my personal opinion. Give more emphasis to your revision than you do to your new memorization. And those are just a few tips. So there was a time when I wasn't practicing, and I missed the fasting, and I missed the salah. I missed the fasting, and I missed the salah. Do I have to make it up? So we distinguish here between the fasting and the salah. My personal opinion is that if you deliberately missed prayers, you cannot make them up. And if you made them up, they wouldn't be accepted from you. Rather, what you have to do is to repent, to pray many, many voluntary prayers to make it up. And the fasting you have to make up. So the fasting, you need to make an approximation of how many fasts you missed. Like example, you became an adult, let's say example, 14, 15, roughly. When did you become, how many Ramadans have you had as an adult with the signs of puberty? So you say like, I think it was about 14, and I didn't used to practice until I was 18, so I didn't fast for 4 years. So 4 years times 30 days. Not rough, give it the best guess that you can for the fasting. But the prayers, you can't make those prayers up. If you miss them deliberately and consciously, then you can only repent and to make as many sunnah prayers as possible. So we've still got quite a lot of questions left, but we don't have time in this particular live broadcast to do any more of these questions, inshallah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do another session, inshallah ta'ala. It's probably going to be tomorrow, I'm guessing, but we might find some time this evening to do it, inshallah ta'ala. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the rest, because we've gone through around about half of the questions, but we still have about half of the questions left. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.